The Charlotte Podcast Festival is presented by Blumenthal Performing Arts, the Queen City Podcast Network, Eclecs Creative Agency, and WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, the home of acclaimed podcast Charlotte Talks, She Says, The List, Amplifier, Southbound, and FAQ City. Learn more about WFAE and our latest podcast, Work It, at WFAE.org.
We've got some great comedy podcast hosts that I'm going to introduce here in a minute. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to do comedy podcasts. We'd love to hear your questions. We'll do a Q&A at the end, but at any point, use the chat function there and send us your questions, and we'll take as many of them as we can get to in the time that we have here allowed. Great. The Podcast Festival is going on all through October, so go and check out all the other events and sign up for as many of you can. Joni mentioned that we just hit the 9,000 mark, so there's over 9,000 people registered for events throughout.
Yay!
This is going to be huge for the market. I'd suggest gallery view is the best way to view this. My name is Cale Evans. I'm with Queen City Comedy. I have a podcast on the Queen City Podcast Network called The Podcast from Hell, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. I also do a podcast called Bat Boys Comedy, and I perform improv throughout Charlotte with Improv Charlotte, with Now Are the Foxes, Charlotte Comedy Theater, Queen City Comedy, and anybody else that will give me a stage. That's the truth. But joining us, we've got some great podcast hosts. We've got Kay Morrow, who you may have seen on HBO's Vice News. She does the Black Guy Who Tips podcast 5 days a week with her husband. 5 days a week. You think you're grinding, she's grinding. We've got Don Garrett, the Chuck Daddy himself, comedian in Charlotte, been doing comedy for 3 years, and is one half of the PoppaDon Podcast, and he's repping the merch, and for sure the nicest guy in comedy in Charlotte. So do yourself a favor and get to know Don. And then finally we got Rod Morrow, the other half of the Black Guy Who Tips, which, by the way, at the end of October, is going to exclusively on Spotify.
Yes.
Hey.
So that's huge.
Thank you.
They've been doing the show for over 10 years and now taken it to Spotify.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Papadon won't even return my calls. So
we used to be there too.
Yes.
We used to take a while to get us an email back from our host, so it happens.
So tell me about that journey. What got the Black Guy Who Tips started? And then I'd love to hear from Don, the same thing as well for yours.
For us, we were fans of a podcast called Keith and the Girl. We were fans of a lot of podcasts, but they really stuck out to us because they were just two people who recorded from their spare bedroom in their apartment. And we were like, man, that's so inspirational. Maybe we should try that. 10 years ago, when there were no such thing as iPhones, iPods had a rotary dial system.
It was the size of a brick. You can knock somebody out with it.
Yeah, so we were like, why don't we record audio and put it on one of these things and try to be funny? And that was how we decided to record a podcast.
That's awesome. So you had the first dial-up podcast, right?
Basically, listen, it was analog. We actually broke the first computer and we almost didn't start a podcast. We had to buy two computers in the same day.
We went to Best Buy like 3 or 4 times. Every computer we got, the sound card was broken. Our first recording is terrible because we sound tired because it was midnight, our 4th time recording. So y'all, it was some dedication because we almost gave it up.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Don, how about you? How did you start the PoppaDon Podcast?
Ironically, I had been wanting to start a podcast, but I really didn't know anybody that was as serious about doing it. It just so happened that my partner and I, Chris Mines, we ended up following each other on Instagram, and then we both did a competition. And it's kind of like how you see somebody online and you kind of look to check and see if that's them. Well, it was him. And so we talked, we exchanged numbers, and about 2 weeks later, randomly, he just messaged me and said, "Hey, you ever thought about starting a podcast?" And I was like, "Brother, I have been wanting to." So that's how we did. We got all the equipment, and we just recorded from his garage for about 5 episodes. Somebody here in Charlotte saw us and invited us to come and have a spot over at they're gonna kill me for not remembering this. Oh man, Power 104.4 FM, hashtag We Are the Streets. So we went over there, started recording, and we just been at it for about 2.5, almost 3 seasons.
Wow.
Wow, that's such a great story. You guys kind of meeting from afar.
Yeah, it's kind of like a podcast love story.
Yeah, you want to record a podcast with me?
Yeah, like I was sending the podcast emojis, the microphones, and he was sending back the cameras. So like, yeah, we did it.
Oh,
It's a meet cute.
Yeah, when they make the PoppaDon movie, Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks are going to play Chris.
Well, Meg's got to be me because I'm curvy. So that she's got to be me. The name.
We have another Green Book on our hands, guys. Okay, we're gonna have to get like Nia Long and Lawrence Tate or something.
Oh, like a Love Jones podcast edition.
I don't want your movie to get boycotted. Okay, it's gonna be Oscar So White out here.
Yeah, we don't cancel before you get started.
No, the name, but honestly, I think the most probably significant thing about our podcast is the name, because it's a mix of both of ours. Chris's nickname is Papa, I'm Don, and that's how we got it.
Oh, right. Well, speaking of names, so where did the Black Guy Who Tips come from?
The long story short, I had a blog that had like just my friends reading it, and it was called The Black Guy Who Tips because there's like a very like bad stereotype that like Black people don't tip
yes.
When they go out to eat and stuff. And so I was like, well, stop saying that. You know me. So if you know me, you know a Black person that tips. And I know I'm not the only one. And when we started the podcast, Karen was like, I don't know if I want to do it, or like not even that she didn't want to do it, but she just thought I was gonna like replace her or something.
That's what I told him. I was like, you're gonna get a replacement, because I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be any good. I might stink at it. What are the rules? Because when we started, they didn't have any rules. Like after we recorded our first podcast, we looked at each other like, now how are we gonna get this on iTunes? Because like everything was like free before now. Like right now it's a little easier.
Yeah.
But this is when you literally had to Google everything or ask somebody.
And so she wasn't sure she would be a part of the show. So I was sure she would be. So I was just like, what I'll do is I'll just call it The Black Guy Who Tips. So there's no pressure. It's just like my blog. Just hang out with me and talk. And then, 11 years later, I'm like, we could have named it The Rod and Karen Show. Maybe it wouldn't have caught on, but it would have been more honest in the title.
Yes, and also I think a lot of people get confused by the title because they're like, it's a woman on when they join because it's called The Black Guy Who Tips. They're like, oh, it's somebody else besides the man.
Right.
Well, it's something about a duo for a comedy podcast, maybe, because one of my podcasts, the first one was the Podcast from Hell, and my partner in that, Jacob Brayton, who does improv in town, he and I love podcasts, and whenever we get together, we talk about our favorite podcasts. And we wanted to do one, and we came up with that together. The premise is the Podcast from Hell. I play the host of a podcast whose name is Cale, and I've been damned to hell, and my punishment is that I have to record a podcast for all eternity. And the only people that listen to it, the only listeners, are people whose punishment is to have to listen to podcasts.
That's hilarious.
So, but it really grew from, we love podcasts. So it's, ours is kind of a parody of podcasts. Especially early on, we were making fun of all the podcast tropes, but all the podcasts that we love, right? We were doing commercials for Unzip Recruiter and Live Actress. And so ours is a lot, you know, we play with the characters and everything, but a lot of it is just making fun of podcast hosts and making fun of things related to podcasts. I tried to pitch it to WFAE, they didn't want it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because that's our podcast is very like conversational and pop culture, but there's so many different paths to take with comedy when it comes to podcasting.
It is.
And I love to see people that start like with a vision, kind of, because we just started like talking.
Yeah, conversations. It was like conversations that we literally naturally have anyway. It was like, oh, why don't we just record what y'all talk about anyway?
And I think for podcasters, one of the things that I love to see is the fact that there aren't really rules.
No.
So especially when you first start, you kind of can do whatever you want to do, and you just never know what people will be into. There was a guy we met in Seattle who does a podcast where he literally just like helps people go to sleep.
It's a huge podcast.
And people showed up to this festival and they were dressed in pajamas for his live show. And it was a lot of people. It wasn't like just like 10 people. It was like a lot of people in onesies and stuff. And it's like that type of innovation exists in podcasting in a way that just doesn't in other media.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. And comedy podcasts, I think, they're behind the podcast trend. There's certainly some great examples, but some of the other genres I think are growing faster than comedy podcasts.
Oh yeah.
Is there any out there that you see that you think are kind of great current now comedy podcasts?
I mean, so that's the other thing too. Some of these podcasts are funny. I don't know if they would categorize it as comedy.
Yeah.
You know, like there's this podcast, Scam Goddess, where they talk about people who are scammers.
That's a good show.
But it's so funny.
Oh, so funny.
But at the same time, I don't know that the host would say like, oh, I'm a comedian, but the show is extremely funny. So it's almost like comedy's that muscle that if you can bring it with you anywhere, you can make a political show, but you're funny. Is it a comedy or is it political, you know?
I think the good thing about podcasts is that it has an identity, but it doesn't necessarily have a beginning or an end. You can kind of go anywhere with it. But the important thing is, of course, putting your stamp on it. So that's what I love about podcasting. It's not like, you know, you do what you want. It's yours. So you can pretty much do it. And, you know, what your audience enjoys the most is that you're being genuinely you. So I think that's what's so dope about podcasts to me. It's the freedom to create.
Yeah. I mean, for both of your podcasts, your identity is part of it. Even though my character's name is Cale, ours is very much a narrative podcast. You know, we go from episode 1 to episode 2 to episode 3, and it has a story. It's all improvised, made up on the spot. So it's different. It's not really about the two of us. It's more, it's a different animal altogether. We borrow heavily from Hello from the Magic Tavern, which is a huge comedy podcast, improv comedy podcast right now.
Yeah, I think also like because we've done improv comedy on we did this podcast twice called Playable Characters.
Yes,
and
it's so much fun.
You come on the show and you're basically assigned a video game character. And then they interview you as a video game character. I believe we played the townspeople in the game Rampage.
Yes, we stayed in the apartments that they keep tearing up.
And then another time we played the assassins from Assassin's Creed that never got their video games made.
Yes.
So like that's a different type of muscle, but that's what I love about being funny is you can bring that skill set anywhere. So like, wow, like for us, we talk about pop culture, we talk about serious things. Sometimes our show segments aren't funny because we're talking about something that we are being passionate about, and then we can flip it on his head,
and we're make jokes about the exact same thing we was just serious about.
And I think we can carry that muscle with us to any show. And so we've done improv. I didn't even think about it that way until Cale was describing this podcast, but we've done that without really even thinking of it as, oh yeah, we do improv now.
Yeah, and there's also we've also done voice acting when we worked with Dexter from Shadow Dogs Productions, and when we did the voice acting, it is improv because Dexter would allow you to kind of record. He would you had like a free range. So Roger would come with various different voices. I would come with jokes, and I think one of the funniest ones we did was, and it's kind of based off of a true story, where a woman was having a baby and they was on their way to the hospital, and the man actually stopped through the drive-through while she was pregnant, and it was like their ordeal. He's ordering food while she's in the back, literally screaming at him about, I need to go to the hospital. And that one was one of the funnest one we did, but it also was funny because it was a lot of improv off of written word.
That's good. Don, how much of your stand-up comes out in the episode?
Oh man, so much of it. Chris and I, what's great is that we're both stand-up comedians. So we've had just random conversations, laughing about things. And it's ended up in one of our sets somewhere because we've created a tagline, we've created some kind of new premise or something like that to kind of work out on stage. So being that we're both comedians, our stand-up's always there, and our styles are pretty much imprinted on the podcast. I'm more the energetic, in your face type comedian. Chris is laid back, deadpan, is just gonna hit you with material, and so it kind of shows through. You get kind of a feel for our styles on stage just by listening to the podcast. Sometimes, before I kick it off, he'll have to stop me and be like, "Whoa, brother, you had too many Red Bulls today," because I'm just, I'm energetic, and he's just like so laid back, man. But our stand up is all over that podcast. Whether you see us on stage or you listen to us, you can see how one would translate to the other.
So, Kay and Rod, do you consider your podcast a comedy podcast, or is it?
I think we do.
Yeah,
I would say,
yes.
It's a comedy podcast, but it's the muscle for us is knowing more when to pull back and be like, we're not going to joke about this. We're going to talk seriously about this thing because it deserves to be talked about seriously, and then transitioning back to jokes. So, because I think one of the things that happens sometimes when you designate yourself comedy or whatever, you then feel like you need to push this, like I'm being funny. This is funny. Oh, we've gone 3 minutes without a joke. What are we doing? And when you get in your head like that, you start forcing things. It's not natural. It's not authentic. And I think the audience can kind of tell. I've listened to podcasts like that where I'm like, man, this isn't really funny, or even worse, I'm enjoying the conversation, and then the comedian stops and he's like, "We haven't made a joke in 2 minutes. I don't know if this is good." And I'm like, "No. I'm as interested in this as any joke you would tell."
Yes, and also I think for me, we're not comedians. We just happen to be two normal people that happen to be funny, and it's recorded because when it comes to comedian, it's an art and a craft to that, and I respect that. So,
I say 11 years in, we are comedians. We're just not. We're not stand-up comedians.
That's right. I call myself a sit-down comedian. I don't stand up to tell my jokes. I sit.
I love it. Don, you and Chris, you take on some serious topics sometimes too, right?
We do, and that was actually one of the major things that we wanted to do with our platform, was to pretty much talk about a lot of serious issues. Per our social media, we don't really get on the Facebooks or the Twitters and whatnot that rant about things that are going on, but we do use the time with our audience during the podcast to pretty much give our thoughts and feelings about things that are going on. As Rod and Karen was saying, not every moment can be funny, but the Papadon, our motto is we give you the frill. Frill is not even a real word. We went to public school, so like we give you the frill, and we call it the frill. It's the funny and the real. We give it all to you, no matter what. And we've thought about possible backlash from things that we talk about. Never disrespectful, but the way that we figure it, it's our platform, and it will be less than us from not being honest about things. Never disrespectful, but we just talk about real things because they need to be talked about. Now, we also crack a lot of jokes. I am mostly weak in there. Sometimes I had to excuse myself from the table because I'd be dying. But it's just, as Rod and Kay said, it's just a mix. That's what makes it great. It's a mix of serious and funny, knowing when to be real about it and knowing when to crack a joke about it.
And I would add too, like, a lot of comedy is failure.
Yes.
So
yeah.
sometimes it's just you thought it was gonna be funny and it wasn't. Like sometimes you thought something was gonna be a serious. Like, we've had times where because I'm the one who behind the scenes like gets the articles for our segments. I write down all these show notes and all these plans and stuff. And then Karen's like kind of the loose cannon. We get in here and then she'll just say some tangent and then we're off to a whole nother direction. And a lot of times by following that direction is where the humor can go. A lot of times the things that I plan to say is that I'm like, okay, this was not as funny as it was in my head. So, a lot of it is failure. A lot of it is I tried to make this joke and it didn't work and I got to let it go,
Yes, and part of the funny is the failure because I am really bad at puns, but sometimes we go on like a 2 to 3 minute pun and the puns don't even make sense, and that's the joke. I was like, who made the rules for puns? Why do they have to make sense?
I'm the opposite. We don't do anything serious. It's only jokes. But this is real. The episode that's out this week, when I edited it, I didn't realize, but we made some jokes about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We recorded it before she passed, and I'm still listening to it. Oh my God, we did not say that. Oh no.
Now that is one thing I always wondered, like, how do podcasters who have to edit and hold it in the bank, how do they deal with that? Because I think we get a saving grace because we put our show out like literally right after we record it.
Yes.
So there's kind of like if we were wrong, and then we do it 5 days a week. So if we were wrong or if we made a joke that was like the next day we can kind of clean it up. What do you do when you're like Ruth Bader Ginsburg down here in hell with us now, and then it's like next week they're like, God, it was the democracy. It has come to a standstill. Earth will never be the same.
Well, I caught it. We record about a week or two ahead, so I was able to catch it in time. So it's not in there. It'll be on the Patreon content.
Yes, you got to pay for that joke. I don't blame you.
It's the parental advisory
Hopefully,
version.
people talk a lot about comedy and what can be funny anymore these days. But I believe people that are comedy fans, they still recognize like these are jokes, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Fun at things, and some things are real and some things are painful, but we're poking fun at them to get some perspective on them, I think.
Yeah, I think the podcast is kind of like the comedy. It's kind of like comparing it to stand-up comedy. In the room, if you've ever been in a room for stand-up comedy, there's like a social agreement that we all have where it's like this person's trying to be funny and we're hoping to be amused. So I always try to approach the podcast like the people listening to this have bought in enough to trust us that we're trying to be funny. I don't think, and we're not shock jocks. We're not like, we're edgy. This isn't
our purpose is to be offensive. We don't do that.
This ain't your daddy's podcast. It's like, we're very like, so I think that kind of aids in the whole understanding. So yeah, your audience does. And then the paywall thing makes it even better because if someone's paying for it, they definitely feel like this is somebody I
They're
trust.
all in.
So they're not going to just show up and be like, wow, really? You killed Ruth Bader Ginsburg? I can't believe you did that.
To be clear, we didn't kill her, but we did drag her down to hell. Love to RBG, just I want to say.
Yeah.
So let's take some questions here in a moment. So if you have some questions, put them in the chat. And while people are giving us questions, I'd love to hear just a little bit about the interaction with the fans. What is it like for your show? And do you think it's different for comedy podcasts than others? Don, you want to start? What's the interaction with your fans look like?
The interaction with the fans is actually pretty great. Because every episode we do go live on Facebook. And we also I've gotten a Google number just so people can call in, to give their facts and opinions about things. And their interaction is really great. Because similar to both of our comedy styles, we both like to incorporate the crowd and talk to people and essentially let them know that, hey, like, just as much as we matter to you, you matter to us. So it's kind of giving everybody that personal attention and let them know that, hey, we're appreciative for all the views and all the listens and things like that. And also from different points from the crowd and different perspectives, as Rod and Karen were talking about earlier, the conversation, we can go off on a tangent and have something else. So incorporating the crowd and the audience, it helps us build more conversation, and I believe that it actually enhances the quality of the podcast. So we get our people involved, like they know they're gonna talk when we come on.
How about you guys from the Black Guy Who Tips?
Our audience is very interactive. We believe that your audience is a reflection of you, because if whatever you put out there, people are going to like it, and that's how they're going to interact with you. And so for us, our audience is very funny.
Mm-hmm.
Our audience, they're very lively, and our audience interacts with us through social media. Our audience interacts with us when we do our live shows, and we have a running chat room. When we do our live shows, our audience interacts with us through that. Our audience interacts with us when we do our premium shows. We have live chats with some of those shows that interact with us there. And so we are constantly getting feedback and interactions with our audience. And the thing is, when we just podcast, and so I've always said we just two people with a microphone just happen to turn it on in the spare bedroom. But to our fans, we're more than that. And so we've gotten to the point to where we can be recognized in the streets, which used to trip me out. I had to get a little used to that, where people just call your name. You're looking like, do I remember you? Do we go to high school together? You start going down your list, but then they realize they're a fan of the show. And so we have met fans literally all over the city. And so that has been a fun and interesting experience.
Yeah, we have, in my opinion, we had the best fans. And not even, no shade to the other shows and stuff, but like we've gone to Seattle, we've gone to Miami, we've gone to Washington DC,
and our fans have showed up. California,
and they always show up and show out. Like it actually made us believe in ourselves, because we did not expect to have that type of following. Because for me, I feel like the internet is cool, but it's not 100% real. Like it's like you can know somebody but not know them. They like someone might want to follow you on Twitter. That doesn't mean they want to buy a plane ticket, pay for a show and a hotel room and come see you. But our fans really made me believe in us, because they were the ones willing to do that stuff. And when we did our show at the Blumenthal Performing Arts Center, like so many people came to town, and we had such a great time.
Yes, literally from all over the world. And it was one from Australia and from France. And from literally, they was flying from California. If you named it, somebody was there. And it was a beautiful experience. And that lets us know that our fans actually believe in us. And I remember the first time we actually did a quote unquote live show. It was actually a panel on the Comic-Con Festival in DC. Yeah. And it was amazing, because when they called our name, they was like Rod and Karen, and I looked out, and all I see was people just cheering, and me and Roger looked at each other like they actually came for us. Yeah. Like that was the first time we was like, like the downloads is real, because it's the thing, when you see the downloads, they're numbers, but it's nothing like you actually seeing those numbers look you in the eye. That's when you realize, oh, this is bigger than I thought it was.
And I'll just add one more thing. I know we've been talking for a second, but the other thing I would add, we started that from like episode 1. And the way we did that was we went and found the fans where the fans were. So if you're a podcaster and you're just starting, if your fans are, when you go on Instagram and you post something like a live, like I'm going on Instagram Live, or when you make a post on Facebook, if that's where people comment, that's where you need to be interacting. You definitely don't want to, like, especially when you're starting, I think a lot of people make the mistake of feeling like they're almost above, like I'm the creator, you're the consumer, I'm above that. And No, I honestly, you're not like, unless you're already famous and you're doing this, then I don't know why you're checking out this panel. But if you're not already famous, then you have to get there and get to know these people, because those are the people that are going to be your lifeline. Those are the people that are going to download your show. Those are going to be the people that write in your letters, all that stuff. We ended up starting a feedback show specifically because we were getting so much feedback from fans, and we were like, okay, y'all deserve your own show at this point. And sometimes that show can be up to 3 hours of just their interaction with us and our interaction back, because they care that much every week.
I don't know about you, Don, but I can't wait till my podcast gets full grown, like Rod and Karen's. And
Yeah, same here, man. Me and my OnlyFans, like I'm gonna need to do something a little bit different, because this OnlyFans ain't gonna last me forever. I ain't gonna have this figure forever, man.
and a quick plug, you talked about live shows. You guys are, we won't take time here, but you have another festival event where you talk about how to do live shows for your podcast, right?
Yeah, we do. We have one about audio setups, and then for like live shows and stuff. And then we have one about being listener funded. Mm-hmm. So we like, if you're enjoying this conversation, charlottepodcastfestival.com. Make sure you check out our other conversations. Our social media has the tags in there and the links to the other ones, so you can follow those. The Blackout Tips everywhere, or TBGWT on Twitter.
Very cool. I'll talk just briefly about kind of our interaction with fans. We're used to performing on stage, the improv, and so it's been helpful for us as we're performing in front of a mic without an audience. I actually picture some of the people that I know are fans, so I'm talking to them. We've even like incorporated their names into characters that we're referring to and stuff. So as people let me know that they watch the show, I start to picture them, not watch, but listen to the show. I start to picture them, and they end up becoming kind of part of it as well. One of the questions, which I think is great, this is from Jamie. Let me find it again. Do you have a format for the show, or does it change every time? Asking for someone who gets caught up in the planning.
That's a great question. So,
Don, let me start with you. What's your format, if any?
You know what? We do a little bit of both. Sometimes it's formatted, and we talk about, especially when it's, talking about social issues that are going on. We have a topic, and we want to stick to it as much as we can. And also the same thing when we do have guests. We like to, ask questions that pretty much center around them and, their art, or, their business, or, whatever it is that they do, because we want to make the interview as much about them as possible. Now, when it's just us, we may have something crazy that we go in talking about, and then we just end up all the way in left field from there. So we do both. We like to plan and like to be spontaneous. It keeps us on our toes.
I think that it needs to be a little bit of both. It's okay to be structured, but sometimes people be too structured, where they do not allow it to be free-flowing, and they do not allow people to get off topic, because sometimes the best conversations are the conversations where you don't know where they're going to go. And sometimes as the host, you have to learn how to let go, and, just let go and just allow it to be a free-flowing conversation. And sometimes some people are so structured that it's almost not enjoyable. I speak for myself. It's almost not enjoyable to listen to, because it's so boom, 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 boom. Particularly when you have a guest, because we've had guests that are very talkative. We just allow them to talk. We have guests that don't talk that much. We'll play games around them. So it's one of those things where you have to be flexible.
I feel like that was a lot of shade coming my way, because I'm the DJ and Karen's the rapper. I'm the one that does all the planning of the segment. And that is one of the things I have to fight against, is being too structured and too rigid and so I kind of had to start looking at it like jazz. I read Questlove has a book called Creative Quest. It's a real short read, but it's about creativity. And I started reading that book, and it made me think about like letting go of the control sometimes, and just letting people kind of flourish, and then trying different things with the show, because it's our show. It can be anything.
There's no rules.
No one can tell us how to do this. We're lucky right now. We don't have like a producer in our ear going, hey, wrap it up or whatever. So we, sometimes we would like during the pandemic, we have guests on sometimes, and we don't even cover like any topics. It's just how are you coping with COVID? What is your part of the country like? What do you do for a living? What are you working on? How did this affect your work? Things like that. And those conversations can be meandering and an hour and a half, and still just every bit as funny as if I would have sat down and tried to plan like some skits and bits and stories. So I think finding that balance is important, but mostly my personal belief is allowing it to be what it's gonna be.
Right.
That's the harder part, to just have faith in yourself and the people you're working with and your audience, that they're gonna get it and that it's gonna be okay. I think Cale, I'm sure with improv you can kind of relate to that, because it is yes and relying on partners to kind of keep it going.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And sometimes I think about we're doing a half hour plus of improv and keeping the same characters, and now that's been going on for about 75 episodes. So that's a lot of improv for the same characters. But our planning too, because it's improv, obviously we don't plan too much. As a matter of fact, when we catch ourselves talking about too much what we want to do, we'll stop and we'll go, no, well, let's just find out when we get in there and start recording. But we do bring guests in. We give them a little bit of a heads up of just like what's happened and what's going on. As a matter of fact, coming up later this month, you can see this guy over here, or hear this guy over here. But that we just asked a couple questions, like, because all our guests are people that you might find in hell, right? So some demons or people that have been damned or whatever. Don was a frog. He was Dermot the frog, Kermit's brother. But we just asked like a little bit about like, what do you look like, so we would know like if we were seeing you for the first time. But we tell them we don't want to hear what you got planned. We just want to kind of make it up as we go. And we've ended up with over a season, like story arcs that go from show to show to show.
That's amazing.
Throughout the season. That's pretty fun. How about segments? Rachel asked about where you come up with segments, and is there a template for that? Do you have any certain segments that you do or you bring back?
We do.
While you're thinking, I'll tell you what we do. We have a commercial just about every episode. So that's like the one
hilarious.
So we'll have a commercial that's typically a parody of the kinds of commercials you'd hear from in podcast. But that's kind of the one thing that we do, prepare, and we edit it in, drop it in the middle. How about you? Any segments that you've done?
We have a lot of segments, and so many we can't do them every show. Like we get to some, and then sometimes we don't. That was another thing I had to learn to let go. To be like, I want to do this segment. I was like, no, maybe we have time, maybe we don't. But our segments have all been organic.
Yes, just naturally.
Yes, we were covering stories that had certain type of for example, we have a segment called Effing with Black People. It's an explicit podcast. Y'all can imagine what it really is. But we had these stories where we were covering things that were like racial incidences that were happening throughout the world. And, as Black people, it's kind of hard to laugh those off sometimes. So we had to turn it into a little game. It's like a game show where we read the article.
How mad are you?
And we score it on how upset we get by the article. And then it took a little bit of the sting out of it and made it more fun for the audience and stuff like that. There's a game we call, we have a segment called White People News.
Yes.
And so
that's fun.
We read about like celebrity, like, oh, Brad Pitt is seen with Ben Affleck at the beach, and we're like read the article, and it's like, oh, he was wearing these type of boxers, and he had a tattoo on his back, and we'll just kind of like decompress with that, where we're like talking about light fluffy news as opposed to like some of the more depressing news out in the world on the daily. We have a segment called there's so many segments at this point.
Yes, it is.
I'm feeling triggered over here. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of our segments do kind of make fun about that stuff. We have a segment where we celebrate Black people getting money. It's called the Black Capitalism segment.
Yes.
And whenever you just see like a black, so it's like Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith signed a 4-year deal with Facebook for $300 million. And we just are like happy that they got some money, you know? So like, you know, it's just segments like that. And we just enjoyed that. And they all came about because we were already talking about stuff. And there's been things that we have come and gone where we used to do a segment. Maybe we ran out of material. Maybe we didn't find it as funny anymore or whatever. And it kind of helps for my brain to segment the news stuff down to keep the show flowing.
How about you, Don?
Oh man, wow. We do not have nowhere near that. We just have we had 2 main segments that we would do as hosts. Chris would have his joke of the day, and then I would also have my segment was called Don's Dilemma. Basically, I get upset about little things like people that wear flip flops but they feet ashy. Like it pisses me off, and so and so it would be little things. That was kind of the running joke. Don's Dilemma is nothing to have an aneurysm about, but because it's me, I'm making a big deal out of it. And then we would play a game called Top 5 with our guests to kind of keep them on their toes. And it would just be random things like top 5 favorite Burger King sandwiches. Like, does Burger King even have 5 sandwiches? So it makes them think, and it keeps things interesting. So we would always have a good laugh about that.
It seems like it should be bottom 5 Burger King sandwiches, but that's just
it depends on the budget, right?
Unless it's brought to you by Burger King, then
yeah.
Then it's top 5, okay?
Yeah, and if it's brought to by Burger King, if they paying me, I'm for sure I'm not eating it. I'm
Yeah,
only eating it while they're not paying me.
We went to see Dave Chappelle one time, way back in the day before he was really famous. But he did this joke where he was like, actually he did on one of the specials too. He was like, people ask me what tastes better, Coke or Pepsi. He's like, whichever one's paying me.
Like it. Jeffrey asked about advice for somebody starting a podcast for the first time. So you guys got 11 years experience behind you. Down, you got 3 years. What would you tell somebody that was planning on starting one right now?
I think for me, if you're starting a podcast, the very first thing, and I feel like be consistent, because the average podcast is 8 episodes and that's it. It's millions of podcasts out there and they normally don't go past 8 episodes. So pick a day of the week or how often you do it once a month and just be consistent and be yourself.
Yeah, I would say it helps to be a fan of podcasts.
Yes.
The way too many people think they're too cool for school to listen to other shows and be fans of other shows, and then they start a show and it's either like, well, this is a retread. Everything you're doing has completely been done before and it's not really authentic or original. Or you end up making a show for people that hate podcasts, which I gotta tell you, not a smart idea if you think about it. Like, it's like, let's make a TV show for people that don't want to watch TV. Like, oh, why are our ratings low? Because no one wants to watch this. So, like, I think a lot of times people kind of stumble into trying to make a show not some things. I say listen to some shows, figure out what you like about that, and then how you can add your own voice to it. And don't be too hard on yourself. It takes a long time to develop your own voice, your own rhythm, your own jokes, for your show to have its own whatever it's going to be. No show is what it is when it starts, period. Like, you listen to someone's first episode, if you're a fan of podcasts, go listen to everyone's first episode of their show and then listen to what they do now. It's always better, polished, and different. So I would suggest don't be too hard on yourself.
Can I share something? Our first episode, we recorded in the car while we were driving. You can literally hear a motorcycle go by us, so we incorporated it into the scene. Like, wow, there was a motorcycle in our podcast. That was before we became a part of the Queen City Podcast Network, and now it sounds much more professional.
Yeah.
First episode was literally recorded in a moving car.
Originally, they're like, man, hell is crazy, man. They got traffic going in the middle of the podcast studio.
He's flying like a bat out of hell.
How about you, Don? What advice would you give somebody starting out?
Man, if you're a fan of Nikes, you're gonna love this. Just do it. It's one of those things. To Rod's point, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to keep, trying at it, because you're not gonna get it right the first time. It's gonna take you a few times before you get it right. But that's all part of growth. It's never a loss. It's always a learning experience. So just always be yourself. Be genuine. Because the one thing about audiences is they have this magical special power to figure out if you're being fraudulent or not. So they'll know who's fraud, and people don't want to listen to frauds. They want to listen to the real, no matter how, who you are and whatnot. I'm a cornball. There are people that love cornballs. Those are my people. So just always be yourself. Never feel the pressure to be anybody else. And just, just have fun. That's the most important thing. Have fun, no matter how, things go, whether it's 8 episodes, whether it's 800, always have fun, because when you're having fun, that translates to the audience. And when you have fun, they have fun.
Yeah, we had the same amount of fun episode like 1 as we do now, and that's super important, because I think that's the part that seems so easy to forget, but when it becomes work, you're not gonna want to do it as much as you want to do it now.
And that's why most people stop at 8. They be like, I actually have to put effort behind this, and they quit.
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to recording and getting to perform with my co-hosts, and to the point where I really don't care if anybody was listening. I just enjoy doing it, which works out well, because some episodes there is nobody listening. Charlene asked a question. We'll wrap it up soon, but how well should you know your co-hosts before jumping into podcasting together?
I mean, I would say very well. Only because what you're doing, if you're gonna have a co-host, so let's put it that way. So, because you can do solo,
Yes.
you don't need a co-host. You can do a rotating guest. You can do a lot of stuff. But if you're gonna do it with another person, you need to at least understand their work ethic.
Yes.
Because so many podcasts start off, hey, look, we're all a little codependent. You pick a partner. You're like, we're gonna do this together. I'm a little scared. It's like going to the movies by yourself. So you get this partner, and then you can just tell from listening over time, like, one of these people is committed to this thing, and the other person's kind of like, I got to do this show.
Yeah.
And it just erodes the positive momentum, eventually kind of decaying the show. And nobody wants to listen to anyone drag somebody alone to go on a roller coaster. They want everyone. When I'm listening, I want to feel like you're both like, we're going on a roller coaster.
Yes. And also the thing is, you need to know each other enough to know that y'all may not like each other, because a lot of people do shows with somebody, and then as the show goes along, I'm like, oh, y'all don't like each other, and it's coming out, because once you hit stop, y'all have to talk to each other when we're off the mic, and some of those offline conversations come back onto the podcast. Like, I've seen it just from years of listening to podcasts. And so you need to be sure that it's somebody that you actually going to get along
and
with.
like, we're married, so we keep it authentic. We would never talk to each other for the amusement of the show in a way we wouldn't talk to each other in real life. We've heard that a lot too. I mean, there's a lot of shows based off of relationships or, couples or friends that, like, the point is to argue.
Yes.
But then it's like, if we don't do that in real life all the time, now I'm doing it for people's amusement, and it's hard to forget some of the stuff people say.
Come on.
And we've had friends that got like divorced that had podcasts together.
Yes, we have.
And we were like listening to their marriage deteriorate as like, it's like every week you're like, man, I don't think they're gonna, are they okay? Like, that didn't seem like a joke. That felt real.
All right.
So I just want to know, like,
go ahead, Don.
In that case, I'm sorry, I just want to know, Cale, in that case, like, who gets custody of the podcast?
You know what? Let's hope
gotta know.
Let's hope we never have to find out who gets custody of the podcast. Don't make it.
I gotta know.
Listen, Don.
Well, what's funny is there was an awkward phase where they kind of split custody, which was weird. It was like one week one of them would be on, and the next week the other one would be on. It's like, man, what is happening in that house?
Yeah, weekdays with one and weekends with the other. Is that how?
Yes.
All
Podcast.
right, we're gonna wrap it up because we got another podcast coming up right after. Another panel coming up right after this. But what would you like to close out saying or plug before we leave? Okay.
You can find everything about us over at theblackguywhotips.com. Our podcast starting October the 26th. 6th. We'll be exclusively on Spotify. You can find us all on social. Well, you can find me on social media at Say That Again. That is a DAT on Twitter. You can find the Twitter of the show at TBGWT.
Yeah, and for me, just you can find me at Rodimus Prime on Twitter, but yeah, just search for our show, The Blackout Tips, on all the social media platforms. We have 2 more events with Charlotte Podcast Festival coming up, and we love to see everybody there. And I just wanted to say thank you to our fans. I see them all throughout the chat, all on the screen and stuff. They, like I said, we have the best fans. They always show up and show out and make us feel welcome wherever we go.
This chat is live, so you should save a copy of the chat. It's some good stuff in there we didn't get to. I'll let you close out, Don, but I'll say queencitycomedy.com for shows and workshops and classes. And you can find there the podcast from hell and Bat Boys Comedy Podcast. And we've also got coming up here at the end of the month 2 workshops with Adal Rafai. He's an improviser out of Chicago who is Chunk, the talking badger from Hello from the Magic Tavern. And he's going to talk, there's one workshop about how to start a comedy podcast and another one where he will work with you on your podcast premise. He will actually improvise with you to flesh out a comedy podcast premise. Don, well, where can they find you? What would you like to plug or say before we roll out?
Of course, you guys can find us collectively on all social media at PoppaDon Podcast. We're currently on Apple Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, and a few more outlets. And you can also find me on Instagram at Don Garrett Comedy, as well as my website, dlgcomedy.com, and also Facebook, the same, Don Garrett Comedy. I don't really delve into Twitter that much, but that's comedian Don G. So thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate it.
All right. On behalf of the Charlotte Podcast Festival, thanks everybody. This recording will go out sometime before the end of the month to everybody that registered. But there's tons of other events. Go find them. Sign up for as many as you can. It's going to be a great big time. Thank you to our guests and thank you to everybody that tuned in. And
Thank you,
to our
everybody.
sponsors.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Good night.